Welcome, everyone. This is the Inner Enlightenment Show, and I'm your host, Laurie Schoenfeld. Today, we have Michael Rupp joining with us to talk about joy connecting. Michael Rupp. Let's go back. Michael Rupp. Thank you, Michael. We're going to be talking about joy in connecting to your imagination. I'm super excited for this conversation, as Michael and I are both passionate about connecting to our inner child through different forms of creativity. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. This is very exciting. I'm happy to share what I've learned and what I'm doing with imagination. I'm also a little nervous. I've not done one of those before, but very excited.
You're very amazing. And imagination, he's taught me some really cool skills. And so I'm excited to just dive more into it with him. Thank you for all of you that are watching now, and also will watch on the replay. While we're on the live, feel free to ask questions. Or if you watch the replay, push #replay so we can come back and answer your questions later as well. So we're just going to jump in. Michael, welcome, welcome. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to in the world.
Okay. Well, I'm a person who wears many hats. My day job is probation officer, which is fun. I actually do enjoy that work. I also teach voice lessons. I've been teaching singing for almost 20 years now. I am an author of YA. I'll actually grab the book right here. So, Woven, there we go. YA fantasy novel. Actually, how I met Laurie, that's how we met, was through conferences. So, yeah, I'm a writer, singer, songwriter. Like I said, I've been teaching for almost 20 years in the realms of music and creativity and acting. So the imagination thing is something that I've been doing forever, but I've recently taken it up quite a few notches by actually researching what is imagination, and that's become the central focus of pretty much everything I'm doing right now. What is imagination? How can it help us? What can it do for us? You know, a lot of questions that people don't really stop to ask. And the reason for that, I think, is that, you know, we think of imagination as something for kids, something for, not for adults. We don't need our imaginations. What do we need that for? And so actively using the imagination just kind of gets stifled, especially when we're expected to live in this world of hard, cold reality. And I think that is one of the probably shortcomings of humanity, if you ask me, and probably one of the reasons we have so much anxiety and depression in the world today, because people aren't connecting with their inner child and their inner roots. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me and why I'm so passionate about this.
Yes, I love it so much, because when I first asked Michael on, we had gotten to know each other beforehand with author events. But when he started diving into imagination, I was super intrigued, because my journey has been a big part of finding ways to heal from anxiety and depression, which very much led me into creativity and imagination in different forms as well, which helped heal some of the wounded inner child pieces that I've been really holding to. So I would love to just dive in with that question of what is joy in connecting to imagination, Michael?
Okay, it's a really great question. One of the first things that I think is important for us to understand is, first of all, imagination has a transformative effect on us. And that's not something people really stop to think about. But think about when you were a child and you would use your imagination in very expressive, unique ways, and how much fulfillment came from that. There was a level of fulfillment, that excitement and joy and mystery and awe and wonder. And those things, they really did cause us to react in very visceral, very real ways. But one way to do that, and I just want to go through a very simple exercise that everyone can try it right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to just imagine, okay? We're going to imagine that we are in a very, so you can close your eyes if you want to do this. Some people find it easier to imagine with their eyes closed. So go ahead and close your eyes. Imagine you're in a kitchen, a very comfortable, warm, safe kitchen. I think of my grandmother's kitchen, very retro, 1960s, with there's shag carpet and the orange linoleum and the the orange counters and the avocado green refrigerator and stove. Yeah, I mean, it was very home, very homey. So think of a nice, comfortable kitchen. Look to the kitchen counter table, and there should be you will see a cutting board. And the cutting board is going to have a lemon and a knife on it. I want you to take the knife and chop and cut the lemon in half. So you're just going to halve the lemon. And then I want you to take that and we're going to cut it again into quarters. So you're going to have a lemon quarter there. But look at the full lemon, all 4 quarters, see it. See how the lemon juice, after you cut it, has pooled on the cutting board table. Like, really visualize that, really see it, really live in the moment. Now take one of those lemon quarters, pick it up, look at it, look at all the individual cells and the individual seeds that might be in there. Go ahead and bite into the lemon. Okay, so what was your response when you bit into the lemon? A lot of people experience a physiological reaction. Their mouth puckers, they salivate, maybe they recoil a little bit. But the act of imagination actually causes physiological change. So that is the first thing to understand, that imagination can evoke a transformation within the body. So when we talk about using imagination to achieve that state of joy, then we need to understand that that is actually a possibility through the use of imagination, that there are ways of doing that. One thing to be clear about is that the brain actually produces chemicals, endorphins, and it produces those chemicals in the brain that send a reward anytime you actively use your imagination. Now, when I say actively use it, I don't mean watching television, because that is not active use. That is passive use of imagination. So you're passively sitting there. You may be absorbing very cool ideas. It may be unique. It might be interesting, but it is not using your imagination whatsoever. So we're talking about actively using your imagination. When you do that, the brain actually will release chemicals, and it will help to create that sense of reward, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of fulfillment, like when we were kids. So that's something to definitely take into consideration. So when we can understand that it can cause a transformation, then we also want to understand what kind of transformation we want to go for, because the imagination can also cause very negative feelings. So let's play. So I want you to imagine. Again, you can close your eyes if you want, or you can keep them open. It doesn't matter. But imagine a very scary monster, sharp teeth, big eyes, hair, and a snarling, nasty, mean face, and its eyes are looking directly at you, and it looks hungry. Now stop and think about how you feel. Do you feel safe? So that feeling of not being safe, and that is exactly what we're talking about. By using the imagination, we can put ourselves into states of safety or states of unsafety, states of danger. Not necessarily like I'm in big danger and I'm going to die, but enough that the brain, the amygdala of the brain, cannot tell the difference between an imagined experience and a real experience. So that's a huge part of your brain. In fact, the only part of the brain that can tell the difference is the prefrontal cortex, the judgment, rational, logical center of the brain. The whole rest of the brain, including the subconscious and everything else, thinks the experience was real. You really just saw a monster and it was really going to eat you, which is why we're talking about how it causes this physiological change in the body. Your body goes into a state of danger, alarm, and it goes into a state of safety and comfort. So then depending on what you imagine can cause transformation. Then that being said, you obviously, if we want to talk about how imagination can bring joy, then we talk about the things that bring us joy, the things that make us happy, the things that make us feel fulfilled. And you may not know what those are. Those may be very deep down. There may be some self-actualization that you get to figure out about what actually makes you happy, what makes you feel safe, and what makes you feel unsafe. And the only way to do that is through experience either imagined or real. But those things can certainly help us understand. So some ways in order to help stimulate imagination could be reading fantasy novels. Fantasy novels require more than a typical just real life novel. Because the fantasy element causes connections. So here's the next piece I want to get into, is that the reason we get those rewards when we use our imagination is we're actually having to take this concept and put them together, and we create a new neural pathway in the brain every time we do that. Every time we take this part of the brain and this part of the brain, and we go, oh, wow, look, those fit together. You can take any different concept and stick it together. That act of creativity coming from this imaginative use, this will actually create new neural pathways to build. So the imagination has a lot of benefits, because not only can you change your physiological state, but you can rewire your brain, creating new neural pathways. So there's a lot of positives. I just attended, actually, on Thursday. I just went to a mental health conference, virtually went to. I didn't.
How we do now, yes.
But I went to the NAMI, Utah mental health conference, and it was really cool because several of the things that I watched, most of the therapies that are really effective right now are moving more toward imagination use. So what was one of them? IFS. So it's called Internal Family Systems. And the whole purpose of IFS therapy is to create imaginary friends. And you use these imaginary friends or family, internal family system. You can create an internal family, but that family is whatever you want it to be. So it could be your younger child, your inner child, your inner self. It could be your inner adults, your inner, elderly person. It could be an inner gender swapped version of you. I mean, there's no limit to it, but the idea is learning to use the imagination to talk to yourself, to have those conversations, to get into that space of inner talking. Because when you go internal and you talk and you're able to make new connections, you're able to incite the imagination, and they're finding that is actually one of the most effective ways for therapy, better than talking it out with a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
You get to go internal, and you get to, and here's something I think is really interesting about the imagination, something that we should all feel very happy about. It is virtually impossible to be inauthentic when imagining. You can't be inauthentic. What you imagine is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's good or bad, but it's who you are, and then you can work on it. So it's very fascinating stuff that I've been learning, a lot of Carl Jung and a lot of that. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about the transformational side of it. I think that's very important.
I love what you just said there. It was really powerful, so I kind of wanted to quote it again, of what you imagine is what you are. And like, as you were talking through all of that beautiful, beautiful information, I was thinking a lot about reality, of how so often we think something's really happening, but we're actually creating that outcome in our lives and then continuing to react on something that isn't even happening, but we're allowing our brain to go into that space, which makes it hard to connect to ourselves, to other people, to other experiences. So yeah, like my brain is exploding now, Michael. All these ideas. What is a technique when people, so you did this side where we have our positive thinking and our negative thoughts that we bring in, and we need to kind of mesh them together, is what you had mentioned before. Mm-hmm. So I know that everyone can relate to this, as we have, the angel moments and the inner demon that comes in telling us what's happening, imposter syndrome, all of that. What is a way that you can share with the viewers to mesh and bring them together so there's more compassion of what's coming inward?
Sure. Wonderful. Great question. So one of my personal heroes in the therapeutic community is Stephen Porges. He came up with the polyvagal theory, which talks about the vagus systems and how integrated they are in the mind, and how the body and the mind are connected. And so one of the ways in which he explains, he says that people have to exist in a state of safety before they can process. Well, we just talked about how the imagination can put you into a state of safety. Mm-hmm. Another way to get there, so what I'm going to tell you now is a great meditative technique that works very well. And it is a breathing meditative technique connected with imagination. So the idea is you want to breathe. You want to breathe in through the nose. Very common yoga breathing, all the breathing you've probably ever heard. But the idea is to fill all the way down to the floor. So when you inhale through the nose, and if you take the tip of your tongue and press it just to behind the teeth, mm-hmm. and then breathe through the nose, it actually will help divert the air to feel like it's going straight down into the lower abdomen area, but get it all the way down to the floor. In Taoist Qigong breathing, this is what they call the gate of existence, meaning the gate of reality, the gate of the physical world, the gate of, or if you're doing like chakras, it's your root chakra, mm-hmm. But it's that gate of existence, root chakra. That's where you want the breath to start, and then the breath rises, and as it rises, it runs right up the spine, to the top, to the crown. So right up the spine. And as you do that, you want to just be relaxing muscles all along the way, feeling the spine relax. There's a lot more emphasis on the spine here, on the inhalation. And then on the exhalation, you can drop the tongue and then push the air out. And as it goes out, imagine it's just kind of rolling down in front of your body. It goes down the front, front of the heart, in front of the solar plexus, and then down in the sacral area, and then back into that root chakra or into that gate of existence. So there's circular breathing here. Stephen Porges talks about breath being the key to creating a state of safety. And this is why I'm showing this, because it's just super important that if you want to create change in your life, you can't do it if you're triggered. If you can't do it if you're in a state of fight or flight, in that state of being triggered. Because once you're triggered, what is the brain doing? It's going to that state of imagining every possible scenario of how you're going to die.
Yeah.
Every possible scenario of, if I do this, I'm going to die. If I do that, I'm going to die. Like, it's just, the imagination can definitely cause problems in that area. So it just Rolodexes and it Rolodexes. And once it's done doing that, it does it again. And it just does it until something else changes. This way, by changing the breath, you actually are causing the physiological transformation, the transformation of the heart rate, the transformation of the breath, the transformation of the sympathetic nervous system will actually change, which puts you into that state of safety, and then the brain can begin to process. It takes you out of that triggered place. So let's just try a few breaths. I just want everyone to breathe. So remember, tongue to the top of the mouth, and then you're going to breathe in through the nose, but fill from the bottom up. Fill from the gate of existence, from that lower region. Here we go. And what's really interesting is probably the first few breaths, you might feel stuck. Like you'll feel it fill, but it doesn't fill all the way to the top. It goes to a space where it just kind of, well, I'm full, but I'm just kind of full down here. You can't see that down here. We want it to feel like the air is traveling all the way up. And if it stops, that might be an area where you need to relax those muscles. So just take stock, think about where is that air going, and then try to relax that. The idea is just soften the muscles all through the spine. So let's try it again. The breath travel down the front of the body as you exhale through your mouth. I don't know about you, but I feel a complete different state of being just in the few breaths that I did. It doesn't take many. It only takes a few breaths to get you into a new state. Okay, so that's first of all what you want to do. That's one of the major techniques that I would show anyone. What do you think of that?
That was pretty cool, because like even just the tongue thing that you did, like I felt like I was able to hold it way longer than I normally do. Like I definitely felt that, but I kind of felt like I was floating a little bit while I was like in that space. So my brain was kind of going, wait, what's going on? But then I was like, nope, we're just, it had that moment of pause for a second. But yeah, I felt way more breath going through my body and more relaxation in areas like my shoulders. that I don't typically release very easy. I hold a lot there. That's pretty cool.
I would, so I always teach my students to do this for singing. Because it gets a deeper breath and you're able to support the sound better. And so, I mean, this kind of breathing, whether it's for meditating, singing, really for anything that you do, it is definitely a different breath, but it will help to create a space of safety. Obviously, the other thing would be to always survey the scene for danger. Like if you're triggered, there's a reason you're triggered, but the reason may not be real. It may not be the real world. It may be imagined. And so just make sure that before you do go through the change that you are looking for any actual physical danger. You may be triggered because the person you are with is triggering you, and there may be a very good reason for that. The reason we get triggered is our bodies are working how they're supposed to. They're trying to keep us safe. They're going to Rolodex until we're safe. Like, it can be a problem. It can take us way out of what we want because we lose that state of feeling in control when we get into that state. And that doesn't bring anyone any joy when you feel out of control. Very panicky feelings. So finding that safety, but make sure you are surveying the scene for actual danger, because there's a reason that you are triggered, and it could be a very good reason.
Yes. So do you see when you're talking to artists and writers, when you hear the term writer's block often,
Yes.
Right? Is that a sense of feeling unsafe within that experience, or can you go into kind of that experience a little bit?
Yeah, sure. That was a very good observation you made. I would say yes. I would say what happens most of the time when writer's block occurs is that people have created in themselves a sense of unsafety about writing. Because when you do feel safe, like there's no reason not to write, but it's when you create that sense of maybe you're putting too many expectations on yourself. Well, I gave myself a deadline and I'm not meeting that deadline. And now I just feel like I can't do anything. And, we're Rolodexing all the things that are going to kill us. We are going to die if we don't write. But that is a big problem, that if you don't feel like you're in a comfortable, safe environment, you're not going to be able to write. If you have kids and those kids have a lot of demands and requirements, and it just keeps taking your concentration, and you get into it for a minute, but then they pull you out, and there really is something going on that is making you feel unsafe, that you can't just sit and write, that you've got to deal with all these demands, that we begin to get scattered and begin to not be able to do those things. So I would say yes, it's definitely tied to that. It's also tied, there is another side of this too, though. I don't want to just put it all into feeling safe. Prefrontal cortex. This wonderful part of our brain that helps us logic and reason and judge, also is our worst enemy when being creative. Because sometimes our creativity is not always logical, and that's okay. We need to embrace the irrational side of it, but you can't do that if your rational reasoning brain is saying, that's just stupid. If everything you put on paper is just stupid, because that's not what, name a famous writer, that's not what they would do. No, that's not what Stephen King would write, like whatever it is. The judgment center of the brain, this is a beautiful thing to learn. The judgment center of the brain gets rewarded every time it judges, okay? That means your brain is getting rewarded every time it's judging you. Every time I look in the mirror and think I'm fat, I actually get a reward in my brain. do it again. I don't want to do that, but I do it again. And I do it again. And I do it again because my brain is actually getting that little bit of reward, that little bit of judgment against me and against other people. This is why people are so mean to each other, because when they're judging each other, they're getting rewarded. That is an actual thing that's happening, a release of chemicals in the brain that's saying, here you go, enjoy that. Good job. So that means that, every time we judge our own work, our own creativity, we are getting rewarded for it. And that's a very dangerous thing, because we don't need those judgments. They're not helping us. You can't judge the work until it's done. Then you can make some judgments, go back and make changes. But there has to be, I would say this about imagination. The key to imagination is that you have the opportunity to create an incredible relationship with your mind, with yourself, in your imagination. This is what I think a lot of people miss, is that they don't spend enough time with positive self-talk. But the reason is because it's disingenuous to look in the mirror and look at this image and say, you're beautiful. It's disingenuous. It doesn't work, because that's not even a real thing, and this isn't real. But when I said before that the imagination is that it's impossible to be inauthentic in the imagination, you go into your imagination and we create a imaginary friend. I have an imaginary friend, by the way. I have several. And they're wonderful. I have one, he told me his name. So this is me just working with my imagination and things just come. But he's a crow. His name is Andrus. And what is really amazing is that Andrus gets to appear. I'll be writing, and sometimes I'll just kind of think about him, and then I'll imagine he's there on the top of the laptop or something. And what's really great is I can see Andrus. I can feel all of this incredible gratitude and respect and love towards this imaginary bird sitting on my laptop. And what's really cool about that is that all this projection is actually a projection of myself. So all of that positive self-talk, all that positive talk, all that positive feeling is actually positive self-talk, positive self-feeling. Also, with the imagination, if I'm imagining an ex who I really hate and I keep seeing them in my head, and I'm putting all this negative friction and energy towards it, that is also coming back at me. So something to be aware of, that what we imagine is going to affect us. But it can have very positive effects. So I just want to share, I think this is a really cool thing. So there is in ancient Tibet, there is a thing called a tulpa. A tulpa is a thought form. It's like a imaginary friend. And these monks would create their tulpa, and their tulpa was there to help them process life. It became a friend, an imaginary friend that could help them process things. There's kind of an online presence of tulpamancers these days. A lot of young kids, but they're creating these imaginary friends, and they're using them to process mental health issues. And it's really fascinating to see that people are actually using their imagination in very unique and very powerful ways that provoke change. If you want to ask what the biggest key to resilience is, like a resilient person, resiliency, it's that ability to take a situation and add new mental connections to it. The best way to do that is through the imagination. And so they find that people who are generally very resilient, they read more, they have good relationships with people, like that resiliency component to handle trauma and to handle, just a hard life is connected with that imagination component. So very interesting.
I love that. Well, Michael and
I could keep talking for hours.
I know, I'm just like fascinated, just letting you, I'm so involved with this conversation. Michael and I did a session a little bit ago, and Nancy Drew was my avatar, which makes perfect sense because I love Nancy Drew. She was like everything when I was a kid that I wanted to be, but felt that I couldn't. And so it made a lot of sense that I was like really wanting to take that journey with Nancy, being safe with her, feeling like I could be something that I'd never allowed myself to be yet, but could now try and do, which is changing. Like you're saying, you can always show up and change that outcome with your imagination of, okay, it hasn't happened yet, but it doesn't mean it can't. Like, that's up to you to create that new possibility and that new area. So I love that so much. We've had a lot of grand adventures, Michael, Nancy, and I.
Good. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the therapy today that's being used is archetypal therapy. Carl Jung, the psychologist, talked a lot about archetypal imagination, using these archetypes being the king, the queen, like a very specific archetype, a god, a hero, there's a whole list of them, the shadow, working with the shadow self, your inner demon, all of those things. And what he talks about is how important it is to personify the issue, taking whatever it is you're dealing with and personifying it so that you can have an intellectual conversation with it. By having that personification, having that intellectualization, you can do that, but only if you're existing in a state of safety. Sometimes our imaginations can come at us a little strong. Sometimes they can be a little uncomfortable. I would say, as long as you can remember it's your imagination, it's not going to hurt you. But this very interesting thing about our nature is that one of the things we struggle with as a society is existing in a state of uncomfortability. We don't want to be uncomfortable, no matter what. And this is why we put off getting therapy. This is why we put off doing all those uncomfortable things. Everyone says therapy is hard. Therapy is not hard. Therapy is fun. Therapy is exciting, especially when you're in your imagination and doing these things. But it takes work. It can be uncomfortable, absolutely uncomfortable. But why do we as a society associate uncomfortability with hard? It's not. It's uncomfortable. So even allowing yourself to imagine states of uncomfortability, knowing that you're safe, being able to surround your setting, put yourself into that breathing and into a nice state, safe state, then you can begin to address some of the things that make you uncomfortable. And as you address those things, that's when your imagination starts to let go. It starts to just explore, and you're able to tap into not just prefrontal cortex imagination, which is I'm thinking of a cat and that cat is going to jump off the sofa. You know what I mean? Like where you're deliberately trying to force it. What you do is you actually get to relax into it and daydream and let your imagination run away with you. And getting to that state requires you to get out of the prefrontal cortex into more of the back of the head, closer to that amygdala, where your brain can begin to generate imaginations spontaneously, where you're not forcing it, where you're not trying, like I can't tell you how many times I've sat down to write a scene in a book and it isn't coming together, and it's so frustrating, and I don't know what to do next. And that aggravation, because I'm trying to make the pieces of the puzzle fit. But what's amazing is when you step back, when you relax into it, when you go to that relaxed state of safety, you start listening to your imagination, it will begin to show up on its own. And you will see entire worlds open up before your eyes. And you can just sit and write. It does require a little it's almost close to the idea of automatic writing. You know, the psychics who would just sit and write, you know, they scribble and then like words appear. There is an amount of automatic writing that if you can just flow with this imaginative place, and I think everyone has probably experienced that at some point or another, but not knowing that, hey, that's something you can actually learn and tap into and get into on a regular basis, every day, all day long. You just have to know where it's at in your brain and know how to get there. But by opening that up, then you can just sit down and type and type hundreds of pages. And it doesn't always make sense, and that's okay that it doesn't always make sense, because that can sometimes be the most exciting piece of information that you're like, wow, this nonsensical thing is so unique and original. How do I make this work with my story? You know what I mean? And then you're just inspired with all these new ideas. And I think, again, it requires a level of trust with yourself, with your imagination. Think of your imagination as a separate entity from yourself, as something that needs love, it needs acceptance, it needs gratitude. And when you give your imagination love, acceptance, and gratitude, yes, you are giving those things to yourself because it is still you. But if you can kind of think of it in terms as a different entity within you, it does allow you to treat it differently, treat it more respectfully than we often treat ourselves. And then by doing that, you begin to see this really beautiful relationship with your imagination that I plan on being connected with for the rest of my life. Like, it's just incredible. Have I talked too much?
No, I'm just soaking it in because I'm getting like the chills and I'm getting very excited. This has been absolutely enlightening, Michael. Is there anything else that you would like to share about this concept? We could literally talk about this, I think, for another few hours because I'm enjoying it so much, and there's so much I know.
I could go for hours. I do feel like I have covered the basics that I really wanted to cover. So if anyone has questions or if you have questions, I'm happy to go into those. Feel free to find me on Facebook, message me. I'm happy to answer other questions that way too.
Perfect. And we'll put the links in the comments below so that you can know directly where to find Michael. We're going to turn it over to the inner child questions. Ding, 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 ding. All right, to get a kind of a feel of the inner child of Michael, we've got a lot of that beautiful inner child of Michael already, which I love so much. Thank you so much for that. All right, the first question for you today are, what are your favorite things about fall?
Oh, fall. I love the leaves, obviously. I do love the leaves. I love just the colors and that whole nostalgia of my childhood and playing in the leaves and rolling in the leaves. I don't have any good piles of leaves, or I would probably go out and do that right now.
You can come over to my house. We'll jump together.
Okay. So, I love that it's just a little bit cooler now, and that it's going to get cool enough that, you know, wearing a jacket, because I like to snuggle up and stay warm. I think it has something to do with feeling safe, but I always feel a little happier when I'm, you know, snuggled up and under a blanket or a hot beverage. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that the rest of the season for that.
Me and you both. I love all the sensory details because there's a lot with the blankets and hot chocolate and the colors and all of that. I'm with you. Angie and Brooke, thank you so much for your comments. Angie said that's true, especially with anxiety. Breathing helps her. Thank you so much, Angie. And that was a really, really cool technique that I haven't tried myself. So I'm really grateful that we got that piece from you today as well, Michael. If anyone else has comments, please feel free to comment and ask Michael either now or on the replay, and we'll answer back on those. The next question is, what simple things bring you joy?
Fortunately, I feel like I'm very fortunate in that I've been able to decide that I want to live a life of joy. So I really try to avoid things that aren't going to bring me joy. So most everything I'm doing, including, being a probation officer and working with clients who have trauma or who have drug addictions, like I actually find a lot of fulfillment in that, and I love that. But music is probably one of the big ones. I'm a huge musical theater queen, so I love those Broadway shows. I love belting out and singing. I think, again, the fall is actually my favorite season. So, that I already said all that, but it really does bring me a lot of joy.
I really love how you mentioned in there that you want your life to be joy, and so that's how you look at everything that's going on in your life. Love, love, love that, because there is so much going on around us. And again, kind of with imagination, what you talked about, we can choose to see what's really working or choose to see what's not working. And so that was your choosing to see all the beautiful pieces that are working every day for you. So thank you for that too.
Yeah.
One last question, because this is a personal question that I have.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite toy either as a child that you like still now or something you just liked as a kid? I have a lot of little toys in my office. They're mine. My kids can kind of share them. Yeah. Or a trinket or something of that nature.
So, favorite toy, maybe not so much a toy. I love writing. That's kind of my treat, my toy, because that's my playground. That's where I get to just have fun. Every morning I meditate. I do that breathing technique. And I do that it doesn't take long. It only takes me a few good breaths to get into that state. And then I just sit in front of my laptop and I go into a place called my inner kingdom. So I've actually created an entire kingdom of where I'm the king, because I'm creating this relationship with my imagination that's very positive and uplifting and building. So I get to be the king in my kingdom, and I have subjects who are all parts of this imagination. To me, my inner kingdom is that's my playground. That's my toy. I have so much fun in there because I have a whole world that I get to explore, that I get to see, that I get to interact with. I have dragons. I have a castle. It's fun, and I spend every day for kind of however long I want to. Sometimes it's only 10 minutes, but sometimes it's, hours. I've been hours in this kingdom before. So it's wonderful.
It's very magical. Yes.
It is magical. I think magic is an interesting term because no one believes in magic, but no one believes in their imagination either. And
I believe in magic.
I believe in magic. I believe in the power of the imagination.
I love that. Is there any last words of advice that you'd love to give the viewers today before we end?
Of everything I've already nailed, I've already kind of drilled the idea, but build a healthy relationship with your imagination. We need that so much in today's world with everything that's been going on with COVID. elections. Just I see so much meltdown and depression and anxiety. I cannot scroll through my feed without someone saying that they're depressed or anxious and that they need help. And all I can think is, man, if people would just build a healthy relationship with their imagination, like I think we could solve the world's problems.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Michael. And thank you for all of you that have watched with us and will watch on the replay. Before we end today, just remember as you go about your day and week to focus on the things that are continuing to work within your life. Next Monday, we have Dallas King joining us at 3:00 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, talking about rekindling the fire within. Have a beautiful day to you all, and thank you again, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Take care.